Hello and welcome to the Cyber Show. My name's Pip Blake. I'm the Managing Director of Disruptive Cyber Group. And today I am with a particularly special guest, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Ed Parsons. Welcome. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, Pip. How are you?
Yes, surviving. Thank you. Just about. So, do you want to do a quick intro to yourself, Ed, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. So currently, I'm Vice President at ISC2. We are an international members association for cybersecurity industry and a non-profit. We've got over 600,000 members and candidates worldwide. Probably best known for some of our certifications, so things like CISSP, or more recently certified in cybersecurity. But we also do an enormous amount of work advocating for the profession as well, and trying to build towards a safe and secure world. Personally, I'm Vice President for Global Markets and Member Relations. So that's really just making sure that we have an impact around the world where our members are, and that we're providing our members with really high quality learning and professional development opportunities.
Well, okay. So for those of you who I know you're avid watchers of the show, we know that we've had John France on before from ISC2. Ed and I have discussed this. We will not be covering the same ground. John was obviously coming at things from a CISO perspective, but just to take from that, and you're obviously 600,000 members. I imagine you don't know them all personally.
No, not personally, unfortunately.
Maybe that's the aim, given your sort of role. But geographically, how are those kind of split up? And I know you've had initiatives which are obviously looking to get 1 million people certified in cyber. What's the geographic split? How is that particular project going? Just to run into those sorts of things.
Sure, yeah, okay. So, our membership is truly global, so it is distributed worldwide. I think we've got members in almost 200 countries, which is great. Naturally, the biggest chunk of our membership is in the US, where we're headquartered and where we started from. But we've got really great representation around the world, across Europe as well. We have 10,000 of members, and indeed here in the UK as well. We mentioned this kind of foundational certification that we've put out, which was really intended to get more people into security, whether that's starting out in their career or transitioning from another field. And in some countries, including here in the UK, as many as 1 in 4 of our members became a member through those opportunities as well. So it's really growing really quickly, and the demographics are really changing as well. So the challenge, as I see it, is that there's many members we have, kind of, I guess, similar to myself in many ways, and broadly, representative of the industry as it was. We've had maybe more time and experience in the industry. We've got to like a certain level within the industry. But nowadays, the big challenge is, how do we get more people into the industry? How do we make it more attractive, more accessible? And how do we develop people from an earlier stage within their career? So we're trying to strike the balance of supporting people, whatever their skills or experience or wherever they might be.
And just because obviously you've got that certified in cybersecurity, then I suppose the other end of the spectrum you have the CISSP. For many, that is the sort of de facto standard. Obviously, there are various parameters in place, so you to have experience across the various domains that particular certification covers. Is there a pedagogical approach to get an individual from certified in cyber to that sort of CISSP level?
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes, but I think it touches on the wider challenge that we have as an industry, which is it's so fantastically complex and diverse. We're talking about emerging technologies, whilst also securing existing technologies. We're talking about new threats, like emerging from those opportunities and from the geopolitical landscape. And we're also talking about securing things in the context of businesses and organisations operating internationally as well. So I think that real diversity lends itself to multidisciplinary approaches. But I think it's also made it quite hard for us as an industry to set paths or kind of like linear progression routes for people to follow. So on the one hand, we're trying to attract people by saying, this industry is amazing, there's so many different opportunities within it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, acknowledging that it's quite difficult to lay out step by step what people need to do. So I guess, kind of speaking from my own experience, not just personally, but also when I was running a business, trying to develop people from earlier in their career, I found it's really important to try and get breadth and depth in terms of your learning and professional development experience. So what I think ISC2 certifications have certainly done for me and perhaps for others is offered that breadth across various security domains. And that's really important, I think, at an early stage in your career, because it helps you understand the sheer range of opportunities that might exist for you. But it also helps you to understand what different security teams might be doing and how you can work with them effectively. But I've also found it really important to have depth as well. So to find the domain that you're interested in, or the technology you're interested in, or the aspect of security that really speaks to you, and try and drill down really deeply within that. And I think that's been good for two reasons. So number one, if you're early in your career, it kind of gives you utility, right? You can prove you're useful because you're bringing something to the team. But also going through that, you're learning how to learn as well, because the landscape is changing all of the time. And I think those of us who've been in the field for a few years have realised that you constantly have to relearn, whether it's about new technology or new aspects of the role. So in a long answer to a short question, I think, my personal pedagogical approach to it is actually looking for breadth and depth. And what we're trying to do with ISC2 is to offer, generally speaking, breadth within our certifications, but then offering the opportunity to specialise through other educational courses, trainings, and learning opportunities that help you build that depth along the way.
Yeah. And you're coming at it from a number of particular perspectives. I know we mentioned before we started the show that you've got sort of the not-for-profit experience, obviously, which with being on board with IC2 now. But how is your public sector and private sector experience as well? Sort of how have you sort of drawn on that to how do those three particular perspectives differ, and how do you and how have they sort of brought you to where you are today?
Sure, okay. So I think I started as a history graduate originally, and I got into security through investigations and incident response. So mainly working with government and law enforcement originally, and working with the victims of cybercrime, helping them understand what was going on and what perhaps they needed to do. And this was in a time, way back, where awareness of cybercrime, awareness was lower, understanding was certainly lower. And what I found was I really enjoyed working with government. It gave me incredible opportunities, really interesting work, opportunities to travel as well. And I thoroughly recommend it to anybody. It was a great place to start my cyber career. But what I found when we were working with victims is that more often than not, the victims were businesses, enterprises, or smaller organisations. And it kind of led me to think that's where the interesting work was. That was really the kind of the battleground. So I wanted to kind of work with more enterprises, commercial organisations that were trying to investigate and respond to cyber attacks. And I figured that the best way to get a kind of variety of experience would be to try consulting first, because it let me work with lots of different clients, all experiencing similar challenges. And that was great for me. It was awesome. It gave me exposure to different industries, and also an understanding of how different organisations actually respond to threats. Because I think if you've been working in security for too long, particularly technical aspects of it, you tend to have you can get quite absolute or dogmatic views of how security should be done. But that can sometimes be at the expense of risks that a business might be willing to take in order to kind of capture opportunities. So that was great learning for me. And then through that, I got the opportunity to actually run a consultancy. And it was while I was doing that I found I really enjoyed working with people, particularly at an early stage in their career, creating job opportunities for them, helping them to develop and grow. But my main challenge, perennial challenge, was finding enough people to help grow the business. You know, when you're a professional services organisation, you're trying to scale it. A lot of that scale is going to come through recruiting people and developing them. So after a while of doing that and feeling like we were pretty successful at it, albeit probably only finding small numbers of new hires, I wanted to try and have more of an impact at scale and see how we could just attract more people to security from other careers or perhaps earlier in their education. And that's kind of what led me to working with a non-profit organisation. So it's really cool now. It's fascinating, having gone from working for like government agencies to working for corporate entities to being in a non-profit and trying to work across all sectors to see how we can kind of fundamentally attract more people. Because I think the topic of the show being about resilience, we know that a large part of how resilient our digital services are is whether we've got enough people, skilled people in particular, helping to secure our digital way of life.
I suppose both of us, we're in a fortunate position where it's where we both specialise on the on the sort of training and certification side of things, certainly at the moment anyway.
Okay.
But we should probably mention the UK Cybersecurity Council and the work that they're doing. So
sure.
Ed and I are both on a professional standards working group for the UK Cybersecurity Council. And I know a lot of, they're trying to pull in a number of the organisations who have got these initiatives to help sort of upskill, reskill individuals into the industry. And it sounds like, although in sort of small numbers, as you mentioned, it's, and a lot of organisations are still having that difficulty sort of maybe finding those individuals, or there's lots of rhetoric out there around, there's the right and the wrong pathways to enter into things. Some people are just lucky, but should we touch on the council's work and maybe some of the initiatives? What are the sort of standout initiatives and aims of that council, which you which you think is, well, as you said, stand out?
Yeah, sure, okay. I mean, it's been great to get the opportunity to work with you and other volunteers. I think we should probably give kudos to them. I think across like certification bodies and from industry as well, that there's a lot of people who are taking their spare time to volunteer to help make sure what the council does is well informed. And I think there's probably 2 or 3 things that the council's doing that really stand out to me as important and kind of worthwhile. So the number one, I think, is through their chartered status, their ability to award professional titles to cybersecurity professionals in the same way that established disciplines like engineering or architecture might be. That's really raising, to me, there's the potential to really raise the status and the profile of the industry. And I don't think that should be underestimated. Many people come to the industry without necessarily finishing formal education or perhaps obtaining a degree. So the opportunity to get a professional title, I think, is really significant. And it also means that perhaps for children or parents, when they're trying to support their own children through like making career choices, anything that makes cybersecurity like more reputable, more attractive as a profession, I think is really good. So that's one thing that really stands out for me. Yeah. And then the other, I think, is the ambition that they have to simplify the market. So simplifying it for consumers, people purchasing cyber services, and also for employees and potentially for employers and potentially employees rather. That to me seems like laudable as well. Actually, recognizing the complexity that we've already discussed, any efforts from an authoritative body to try and simplify it, to make that easier for people, to make the industry more accessible is got to be worthwhile.
And from an international perspective, so obviously sort of chartership for the UK is it's obviously standout, or it means something in the UK. Now, IC2, a international, 600,000 members of multinational organisation with, obviously I come from the EC Council background, or my EC Council was my where I was for several years. So we know that their certifications sort of have that international reputation as well. So how do you think the sort of chartership will fare from an international perspective?
Yeah, I think that remains to be seen, actually, and I think there's a bit of a balance to strike. And it's totally achievable. Like I think we can get it right, but I think most of the views I have are based on my own personal experience, not necessarily working for ISC2, but actually how certification helped me. So when I was coming out of government, I'd done a bunch of interesting work that at the time was hard to explain, hard to translate, and therefore it probably limited me in terms of the job opportunities that I could get. So CISSP was really important for me because it gave a kind of an independent proof of the knowledge and the experience that I had, which made it easier for me to get jobs, but also crucially it made it possible for me to get international opportunities. And I think that was really transformative for me and for people I worked with, the opportunity to take like really cool engagements overseas that would have been harder to get without some kind of international standard. I think that's particularly if you're not working for a blue chip multinational organization where you can trade off their background. Maybe you're working for a smaller organization doing something interesting in security. Having a certification really helped me to kind of get access to those opportunities. And I think that's true at a micro level, like as an individual, but I think it's also true at a macro level as well. We've discussed there's this enormous growing global cybersecurity market that is dominated by the US, where we see countries like Israel, for example, you mentioned, having a disproportionate amount of success, relative to their size. And that's the opportunity for the UK as well. It's not just about like how do we build the workforce to help the UK economy like prosper, but it's also about how do we capitalize on international growth opportunities, through high-tech industries like cyber as well. So the balance we've got to strike, I think, is you have a national certification or national scheme, rather, that you can proxy across to other international certifications or standards, whether that's ISC2 or somebody else's, frankly. It doesn't matter. And so that's the balance I think we need to strike.
Yeah, I suppose sort of leveraging other other industries, other chartered professions here. A doctor is typically a doctor anywhere. An accountant is, whether it's a UK chartered accountant. There's applied set of skills that can be utilised globally. And I know you've mentioned the international opportunity. I don't know if you know off the top of your head how many international chapters ISC2 have at the moment. But,
well, I think we've got 167 chapters current and chartering at the moment. So volunteers that are applying to become a chapter. And it's about a 50-50 split between the US and the rest of the world. Wow, so that means that we're actually really well represented by those volunteers, just doing really cool things in their local communities and in their local industry.
I suppose that advocacy work is something that I've always admired about ISC2. I know that there's various reports that you come out in terms of the employment report. I know I've sort of got that wrong. What's the
workforce study?
The workforce. Sorry, the workforce study where you leverage your membership, those 600,000 members, and obviously that's a huge data set to gather sort of intel from. What in terms of obviously does it expansion look like in terms of those? That's so very US dominated at the moment. Your role I know is one of international with member relations. How are you working to expand that and maybe not necessarily, or change that sort of 50-50 percentage away from the US, and maybe not away from the US, but build on that international market that you have already?
Yeah. I think fundamentally for us, we need to be representative of our membership and the industry at large, wherever they are, right? And I think we've kind of gone through it in. There's like maybe 3 stages to it, and we're about halfway through at the moment. So first stage, as you point out, was research. So looking at ways where we can tap our global membership to provide insights that are meaningful to policymakers, and also like represent the views of the industry at large. So I think for our last workforce study, we got I think the sample size is just short of 15,000. So it's a really robust like global sample. And that's helped us to provide insights on things like attitudes towards artificial intelligence, the impact of economic uncertainty, and also actually I think shining a light on really how much the demographics in the industry are already changing and what more we need to do there. So I think my experience with the workforce study is it's been good for us kind of helping to shine a light on the scale of the challenge that we have in terms of the workforce study, but not just like marveling at the problem, just like digging into it and going, well, what insights are there in there? How are businesses tackling it well, or what can governments do to respond? So that was like research was the first stage. Second stage has been out actually advocating for the profession and making sure that we are playing a role and providing a voice to our members in public policy, particularly in like policy development at the moment. We are in this golden age of cyber regulation. We're right in the middle of it. We may not get it so good again. I think that a lot of the policy focus is already shifting towards artificial intelligence and security as part of that. But right now, we've got a large amount of political focus, attention on cybersecurity, and that's reflected in legislation. So we're out there, not just in the US, but really active within the UK and across the EU, and also across Asia Pacific, working with agencies and government departments to inform public policy. And then the third stage, I think, where we need to get to is rather than me or another ISC2 employee doing that on behalf of members, is to actually have members doing the advocacy themselves, right? Because I think that they are going to be far more authentic or credible than I might be, or others, frankly, in some situations, certainly in some countries. And also it provides like really meaningful volunteering opportunities for members as well. So I think recently in the UK, we had the opportunity to take part in the McPartland review of cybersecurity. And we got the chance to like convene panels of volunteer members from different industries, so from gaming and across infrastructure as well. And I had the privilege of being able to observe some of that, and it was just really powerful, actually. I think the feedback that we got from people that took part was that this was a great volunteering opportunity for them. In many cases, the first time they'd ever met an MP, certainly the first time that they'd met one to talk about their experiences, and their industry. And I think some of their the experiences they've shared have been reflected in the review, which was published recently. And that's kind of the watermark for me. If we can provide that level of those kinds of opportunities for volunteers to advocate on behalf of the profession, then we're doing a good job.
For anyone who hasn't read that report, it's recently came out, and ultimately we believe it's probably going to sort of help dictate, regardless of government, the direction of cybersecurity, or the direction of the cybersecurity industry for years to come, I imagine. And one of the items, and I know that we both come from or have a training background or elements to that. You touched on gaming there, which is sort of in the McPartland. For those who are, we had a recent guest who, again, sort of was talking about sort of getting individuals sort of at or kids in at a young age who are playing, utilising Roblox, utilising Fortnite, playing games on Fortnite.
Yeah. Okay.
How informed was the partner report from that perspective in terms of helping individuals into the industry from a security perspective?
When I mentioned gaming there, I was talking about gambling and
Oh,
sports and things. So I'm cautious not to use that perhaps as the way to encourage people into the industry.
Yeah.
But I think what's fair to say, I think the report puts a lot of emphasis on skills and workforce development. I think there's a whole section or recommendations around that. And we recognise that there's probably like a few target audiences that we have there. So a kind of really crude way to cut it up might be looking at people who are still in education at any stage, or people who are already in the workforce or about to enter it.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say that ISC2 has tended to focus on that latter group. Okay. So people who are maybe in like tertiary education just about to step into industry, or people who are looking at transitioning across. One of the reasons that we focused there is, I think, frankly, because, well, number one, there's like an urgent need for skilled professionals. We need people right now. And, most of the workforce, or the workforce of the future, is actually already in the workforce, and it's about how we get them to transition across. But also, I think, reflecting that there's a bunch of other organisations, whether it's non-profits, charities, or across industry, that are doing loads of awesome work to make cybersecurity more appealing to people who are still in education. So we've just tried to kind of support and promote those opportunities while we focus on the other group. But the point that you make, I think, is really well made. We need people with it's a complex problem, so we need requires a multidisciplinary approach. So we've got to attract people with a range of different skills, expertise, aptitudes as well, and recognizing that you don't do that through, exclusively through like formal or conventional learning methods. Of course. And I think, you've probably seen it yourself as well, that even within the industry, there's been recognition of that in the form of new learning opportunities that are emerging, or new modes of learning that are becoming available for people. And I think particularly in the like in security awareness space, lots of quite cool and creative things that we're trying to do to gather people's attention, using approaches like gamification, where it's appropriate to get people to engage in the topic.
And that awareness piece ultimately, I think, is and I think I know I sort of just mentioned the gaming and the gentleman who I had on the show previously. I think he's basically trying to bring cybersecurity and put a Hollywood spin on it, which would be amazing. I know that there's lots of various government initiatives out there and various not-for-profit and private initiatives as well, which have never cyber's never quite got the attention that it's needed. But from an ISC2 perspective, and maybe we're looking towards the overarching theme of this is the future of cyber resilience, and what is needed from maybe it's the workforce perspective, or certainly from an ISC2 perspective, for as a nation, as a industry, or just as a whole, to become more cyber resilient.
Yeah, so we argue that having a skilled workforce is fundamental to resilience. I think that our research shows that respondents to our surveys say their organisations are more at risk because of a lack of workers or a lack of appropriate skills within that workforce. So we've tried to focus on that issue as one of like the fundamental building blocks of resilience. And I think that the biggest opportunity for us lies in diversifying the workforce, kind of for two reasons. One, because there's strong correlation between diversity of people and cognitive diversity or diversity of thought. So, if we have a more diverse workforce, we're more likely to get different views on problems and more effective solutions. but also because while there have been improvements, we know that, if you slice the workforce by many different demographics, you'll still find loads of groups and communities who are underrepresented relative to society at large. So that's the biggest opportunity for us. And I think, actually, if you come down from like a macro level and you come down towards like an organizational level and how they tackle security, how they become more resilient, the truth is that the demographics within our workforce are already changing. There's a lot more that we need to do, but they are already changing. If you look at the workforce, say below the age of 40, particularly below the age of 30, you're more likely to see ethnic diversity. You'll see a greater representation of women, and you'll also see just more diversity generally. And the employers the organisations who are doing well in that space, that are doing well in terms of recruiting the amount of staff they need, getting the right skills, they're aware of that, and they are capitalising on it by paying attention to what that new or relatively young workforce expects from an employer. So by focusing on things like having flexible working arrangements, investing in DE&I initiatives, and also crucially investing in training, they're actually being more successful in a competitive marketplace for talent, and as a result, their organisations are being are more resilient as well. So that's kind of strong message that we've been putting out in, because we see through the data that it works. If you can build awareness of how the workforce is changing, if you can make yourself more attractive to a wider range of potential security pros, then you're going to be more resilient, and overall, hopefully, we all will be.
Yeah, and I think cybersecurity, or the demographic, has suffered from maybe a traditional view of someone sort of just sort of sat at a laptop the whole day. It's not the soft skills are certainly something which there's been a lot more emphasis on over the last certainly over the last few years. So it's not just it's not just sort of technical individuals that are needed within cybersecurity. It's a much wider array of individuals to help grow that base level that we need. Ed, we're coming up for our time, and we always like to give individuals the opportunity to shout out particular people, projects, or whatever the case may be. But is there anything you'd like to touch on before we finish the show?
Well, I think I am a duty bound in my role, but also genuine in wanting to really put out a huge thank you and acknowledgement to all of our volunteers. So over the last year, I've had the privilege of working many of them personally, who've joined our advisory councils or task forces looking at specific issues like supply chain risk management. So I wanted to say a big thank you to them and everybody else who's volunteered their own time and expertise to help inform what we do and public policy as well. Also, I think credit to government and law enforcement as well. I think we're seeing a lot more efforts from law enforcement and the agencies that support them to really crack down on cybercrime and fight back in what is a kind of contested domain. So I think that's to be applauded. But also we've seen around the world, wherever we've had dialogue with government, we've seen real openness and willingness to seek and obtain the views of the industry as well. So my experience working with policymakers is that they really want to make sure that their policy is well informed and that it supports the industry. So that's to be commended, and I think that probably kind of leads me on to my last kind of call for support and acknowledgement is that informing public policy, like advocating for the profession, it doesn't come naturally to everybody, but it's also probably not the first thing that people think about when they're going about their day-to-day work. So I think it is worth recognising like individuals who've really gone out of their way to inform that. So the first one that springs to mind for me is Jen Ellis, who's been doing kind of really fantastic work to try and bring technical professionals into the policy space and vice versa. So a shout out to her, I think.
Great. I know our mutual friend John Ormond tried to get me on one of her panels. Unfortunately, I was unavailable and probably nowhere near technical enough. So it's so it sounds like that's a bit of a shout out to sort of public sector, private sector, and to your membership base as well. So that's a nice way to end. But Ed, thank you very much for joining me. And hopefully we'll see you again soon. Depending, maybe we'll catch up in a few episodes' time and see how things have progressed. But to everyone at home, thank you very much. This is you've been watching the Cyber Show. I've been Pip Blake, and you guys have been beautiful. Thanks very much.